PGCE, Methodology and Findings and Discussion. Tips and tricks for succeeding. My name is Steph Bennett. I'm a Learning Development Tutor in the Hub. Today's aims: to develop an understanding of the Methodology chapter and Findings and Discussion chapter in your final report. We will look at the journey so far, a quick recap of the chapters, the methodology structure, the findings and discussion structure, and some Peel examples. The journey so far. Your report should have an abstract. This will be around 150 to 300 words, and it's a summary of the whole report. You might want to use the IMRAD structure for this. Introduce the focus and purpose of the study. Emphasise the methods used to collect data. Present the results from your study and offer a discussion as to what these results suggest and why they are significant. The introduction lays the foundations of the topic you're exploring and the study you undertook for the reader. The literature review looks at the existing body of literature. It explores it, analyses it, critiques it, and offers a place for you to slot your study into. The methodology chapter will look at this shortly. Same as the findings and discussion chapter. In your conclusion, this is kind of like your final reflection, what you found out, what the answer is to your research question. You're going to have a reference list done in APA 7th of all the sources you've used throughout the report, and you might even include an appendix or a set of appendices, and this might include any methods evidence or results evidence to back up the things you've mentioned in the report. Methodology. Here is an example draft structure, which I'll discuss in just a moment. Remember, if your tutor has given you a different structure, please follow that structure exactly. This is just a stereotypical approach to a methodology chapter on a PGCE course. In your opening paragraph, you need to state that you implemented an action research methodology in your point. Then you need to describe and explain what action research is using the literature in the evidence. Then you need to state why this methodology was suitable for undertaking your study. What were its strengths? Use lit to support you here. Don't forget to cover its limitations too, and maybe how you mitigated these limitations. For example, action research can be inherently biased, but reflexivity could be an approach to tackle this. In your second paragraph, you need to state where the study was undertaken, and you need to mention what type of sample you used. You must use a pseudonym for your school, for example, setting A. Your sampling strategy might be a non-probability sample type, like a convenience sample, where you conveniently had access to participants, or a purposive sample, where you purposely chose the participants to retrieve the evidence you needed to answer your research question. You might also describe more characteristics of your sample in this part, if it's relevant. For example, the age of the participants, or maybe how long they'd been teaching. Then you need to describe and explain your sampling strategy using the literature to support you. Then you need to state why this sampling strategy was suitable for your study, drawing on the strengths of the strategy using literature to support, or even the limitations, again the literature, and how this was mitigated, or why the strategy was still used despite its limitations. Then we move into the methods section. Depending on how many methods you have implemented will depend on how many paragraphs you can allocate yourself. If it's one method, it will happily fit within the designated word count if you're using around 200 words per Peel paragraph. If you've used 2 or 3 methods, you may have to dip into your extra 10% word count to give you the space to discuss them. Try and take a paragraph per method, if possible. You begin your methods paragraph by stating what method was implemented to gather data. Was it a qual one? Was it a quant one? Were there open or closed questions involved? Was it undertaken online or in person? Then you need to draw on the literature to describe and explain what this approach is, especially if it's an unusual type of data collection method. If it's a standard approach, maybe you need to offer some information about why this is such a useful method by drawing on the literature. Then you need to explain why this method was suitable for your type of study. What did it enable you to do? What limitations did it have along the way, and how did you mitigate them? Often people mitigate limitations with methods by adding in another method to triangulate their data, which strengthens the validity of their findings. After you've looked at your methods or method, depending on how many you're using, you need to state how the data was analysed. Did you use descriptive stats or thematic analysis, or a bit of both? Did you triangulate your data to combine insights? Who in the literature discusses this approach to analysis, and what do they say about it? How did you specifically go about analysing the data? For example, if you did use thematic analysis, you probably followed Braun and Clark's 6-stage approach to coding, so discuss this. Then note why this analysis approach was so useful. For example, in Braun and Clark's book In the Library, in Chapter 1, they offer a bunch of reasons why using thematic analysis is really suitable for certain types of studies and data. You might even want to note some limitations with the approach. For example, thematic analysis is really time-consuming because you're familiarising yourself with a bunch of transcripts to find the most common or interesting elements that have been said about your topic by your participants. You can tie this up by reiterating why the approach was still useful despite its limitations, or if you had a way to mitigate the limitations, you can also discuss this. For example, some people use thematic analysis softwares such as MaxQDA to help them arrange their transcripts and codes more efficiently. It's important to note that MaxQDA does not use generative artificial intelligence to code your transcripts for you. Finally, you're going to tie everything up in this chapter by stating that you maintained ethical approaches throughout the study. And you'll need to discuss the following: how you gained informed consent from participants and why this was important. Use the literature to support. How you maintained the anonymity and emotional safety of participants, why this was important, use literature to support. How you offered the right to withdraw and why this was important, use literature to support. How you stored data as per the Data Protection Act and why this was important. And when this data will be destroyed, for example, upon receiving a final grade. The literature you'll most likely refer to here is the Lincoln Bishop Ethics Policy, available on the Ethics course on Blackboard. The British Educational Research Association's Ethical Guidelines, please look at the updated 2024 version. And you may even refer to other authors like Denscombe's Chapter 3, which discusses research ethics to further support this paragraph. Typically, the methodology section is written in past tense, and overall this section will describe approaches, explain approaches, support with literature on approaches, critique the strengths and limitations of approaches, and reiterate the appropriateness of the approaches. And hopefully you gauged that from my breakdown of the draft. For your methodology chapter, here are 4 really useful books to look at on WorldCat to support you. We have Bell and Waters, Newby, Denscombe and Cohen et al. Findings and discussion chapter. Here is an example findings and discussion chapter. Now let's discuss the ins and outs of this. In your findings and discussion chapter, you might want to open with an introduction that states on the whole how many findings were retrieved from the participants and the general themes they align with. For example, in my recent study, I looked at learning developers' perspectives of Gen AI in HE assessments. And my findings were broken down into 9 themes, and they sat under the subheadings of opportunity, risk, ethical implications, and institutional practices. After this, you need to present your findings in a logical order. They might mirror the themes or ideas you presented in your lit review. Either way, make it flow start to finish so the results don't look like they've been presented in any old way. You need to use Peel again here for each finding. Your point, what was one of your findings? Your evidence, what evidence do you have from your data to back up this finding? Here you can use graphs, charts, figures, snippets of transcript using double quote marks for your participants. And please don't forget to pseudonym your participants as well. Participant 1, 2, 3 or Bob, Sally, Taylor. Then you need to state whether this finding aligns with or deviates from the literature in your lit review. And then more importantly, the critical perspective. What does this suggest to you? And why is this finding significant? Then you need to wrap everything up with a link sentence that states how this finding contributes towards answering your research question. In this chapter, you can also, if you've been asked to, note how your findings might be limited in some way. For example, were your data collection processes a little shaky, hence the reliability of what you found might be skewed? Did the small number of findings limit their potential validity because there were not enough wider responses from larger populations? Did the small number of findings limit the generalisability of the study as a whole and its applicability to other settings or other practitioners? Remember though, despite these limitations, which you're always going to get with such small and quick studies like this, you still positively learnt something about your professional practice. You learnt something about your professional identity, and hopefully it's given you some tips and tricks for moving forward into your ECT years. So don't obliterate yourself in this section. Always flip it back on its head and come back with the positive. And here are some Peel examples. Here is a Peel example for the methodology chapter. You can see this Peel is about a method that was implemented to gain data. The point states questionnaires were selected as the primary method of obtaining relevant quantitative data for this study. This approach enabled large-scale data collection, as noted by Denscombe, who highlights the efficiency and breadth of coverage that questionnaires offer in educational research. As demonstrated in Appendix A, the questionnaires were carefully designed to include both open and closed questions, allowing for a balance between measurable responses and more nuanced insights. While Clough and Nut-Brown caution that questionnaires often suffer from low response rates, this limitation was addressed by distributing them during scheduled class time and providing clear instructions to encourage completion. And that's the evidence. Now let's go to the explanation. What does it suggest? Why is it significant? Why was it suitable? This strategy may have introduced bias, as participants could have felt obliged to respond, potentially affecting the authenticity of their responses. Nonetheless, the increased engagement suggests that embedding data collection into familiar routines can enhance reliability and support meaningful analysis. Now let's wrap it up with a link. Overall, the questionnaires successfully generated the relevant data required to support the action research methodology, offering both scale and depth in understanding pupil engagement. And let's look at a findings and discussion Peel. Let's begin with the point. The findings indicate that the word wall was most effective when used in conjunction with a structured vocabulary lesson. Now let's draw on the evidence from the data. In my classroom experience, I typically noted that a greater number of pupils visited the word wall following a vocabulary-focused lesson than at other times, and the planned observation reflected this pattern. The reliability of these results was further explored through the interview with Teacher A, which helped determine whether this pattern occurred consistently following vocabulary lessons. For example, they explained, they definitely use it more after a vocab lesson. It's when the words feel relevant to them. Now let's explain what this suggests, why it's significant, and how it aligns with or deviates from the literature review. This aligns with the findings of Braverman, Bernetal, and Vilms and Siri, which demonstrated that children were more likely to engage with physical classroom resources when they were linked to a specific task. Hence, the increased use of the word wall may not be simply due to pupils being aware that an observation was taking place. The finding reinforces a possible link between structured learning and the use of physical resources, such as the word wall. In doing so, it provides further support for Smith's claim that integrating learned information with physical activity can aid in its retention. And now let's wrap everything up with a link. As a result, it can be suggested that the effectiveness of a word wall in supporting vocabulary development is enhanced when it is integrated into direct teaching, and this is something I aim to continue developing in my practice. Now let's look at sentence structure. Sentence structure is going to be a huge part of the findings and discussion chapter and the methodology chapter, and in fact the whole report. When you get your sentence structure flowing, it helps to get your message across more clearly. And here we have two examples. Which is the strongest in terms of sentence structure, and why do you think that is? If you'd like to, you can pause the video for a few minutes to have a read. Did you get it right? It's example 2. Ultimately, sentence structure is at the heart of good quality academic writing. This is because it helps to clarify the ideas being discussed. When done correctly, it can be used to draw attention to the author's most important points. As a result, it can help to make the argument more effective. You can see it kind of follows appeal structure because every sentence builds on the one before it. It uses signposting language. These are cohesive devices that help the reader figure out kind of where they are in the paragraph structure. You can see we've got ultimately and as a result. And also, effective punctuation has been used in terms of full stops. The example above it is one long continuous sentence. This is referred to as a run-on sentence. On Microsoft Word, a run-on sentence is 3 lines or longer. Run-on sentences can sometimes confuse the reader. By the time they reach the end of the sentence, they might be thinking, I'm unsure what I've just read, and they have to reread it. This is because they've not been given the time to pause and absorb the information. So we're going for example 2 in our academic writing, not example 1. And moving forward, head to the Learning Development Blackboard course for step-by-step guides and videos to writing every chapter in this report. Scribber also does the same thing. You can book a one-to-one with Learning Development, and don't forget to cite and reference throughout the report using our online Academic Integrity Guide on Blackboard. Blue videos are in-text citations, teal videos are references. And if you have any questions or suggestions, drop me an email at stephanie.bennett@lincolnbishop.ac.uk. Thanks for being with me today.